Commander Zexhai stood before the tactical display, his 6 eyes analyzing the data streaming across the holographic interface. The human vessel had been detected 3 solar cycles ago, drifting near the outer rim of Kytherian space. Intelligence reports suggested it was a research vessel, lightly armed and operating with minimal crew. Perfect for what the High Command had ordered. Status report, Zexhai demanded, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. The target vessel remains stationary, Commander, reported his tactical officer, Subcommander Veltar. Our scans indicate a crew of 12 humans aboard. The ship appears to be conducting deep space surveys. Zexhai's compound eyes gleamed. The Kytherian Empire had been studying human physiology for months, ever since their first encounters with the species at the Proxima Nebula. What they had discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. Humans possessed an unusual resilience, an almost supernatural ability to survive in conditions that would kill most sentient species. Their muscle density was triple that of average galactic races. Their bone structure could withstand pressures that would crush Kytherian exoskeletons, and their healing factor was remarkably advanced. But it was their psychological profile that truly intrigued the Empire scientists. Humans displayed an irrational tendency towards self-sacrifice for their companions, often fighting beyond logical parameters when protecting others. The High Command believed this trait could be weaponized, turned against them. All they needed was a live specimen for proper study. The research vessel Endeavor floated silently through the void, its crew unaware of the predators closing in. Dr. Sarah Chun worked alone in the ship's biolab, analyzing samples collected from a recently discovered asteroid field. The mineral compositions were unlike anything in the galactic database, showing traces of elements that shouldn't exist in this region of space. She paused in her work, stretching her tired muscles. The rest of the crew was either asleep or on routine maintenance duties. As the mission's xenobiologist, Sarah often worked odd hours, finding the quiet solitude of the night shift conducive to detailed analysis. The ship's proximity alarms remained silent. The Endeavor sensors were focused on the asteroid field, not on potential threats from deeper space. It was a vulnerability the Kytherians had counted on. 3 Kytherian assault cruisers emerged from hyperspace, their cloaking systems masking their approach until they were within striking distance. Each vessel was twice the size of a human research ship, armed with plasma cannons and equipped with boarding pods designed for rapid personnel insertion. All ships maintained formation, Zexhai transmitted to the fleet. Remember, High Command wants the female scientist alive. The files indicate she is their primary researcher. The others are expendable, but try to take at least 2 more alive for comparison studies. The Kytherians had done their homework. Intercepted communications had revealed Dr. Chen's importance to the mission. Her expertise in xenobiology made her an ideal subject for the Empire's research into human adaptability. They had studied her background, her psychological profile, her relationships with the crew. Everything suggested she would be cooperative if properly motivated. They were about to discover how wrong their assessments could be. The first indication of trouble came when the Endeavor's communications array suddenly went dead. Chief Communications Officer Rodriguez noticed the disruption immediately, his fingers dancing across the control interface as he attempted to restore the connection. Captain Morrison to the bridge, he announced over the ship's intercom. We've lost all external communications. Captain James Morrison arrived within minutes, his weathered face creased with concern. At 52, he had commanded deep space missions for over 2 decades, and his instincts told him this was no routine equipment failure. What's our status, Rodriguez? All comm systems are being jammed, sir. The pattern suggests directed interference, not natural phenomena. I'm reading massive electromagnetic disturbance coming from bearing 27 Mark IV. Morrison's blood ran cold. They were in uncharted space, far from any known shipping lanes or military patrols. If someone was jamming their communications, it meant only one thing. They were under attack. Red alert, Morrison barked. All hands to battle stations. Engineering, I need maximum power to shields and weapons. Navigation, plot an escape course toward the nearest trade route. Alarms blared throughout the ship as the crew scrambled to their positions. In a biolab, Sarah looked up from her samples as the red warning lights bathed everything in crimson. She had been through emergency drills before, but something felt different about this alert. There was an urgency in the captain's voice that made her stomach clench with fear. The Endeavor was not a warship. It carried minimal defensive armaments, primarily designed for deterring pirates or clearing debris. Against a coordinated military assault, their options were severely limited. "Contact!" shouted the sensor operator. 3 large vessels decloaking off our port bow. Configuration unknown, but they're definitely not human. Morrison gritted his teeth. First contact with an unknown alien species, and it was starting with hostilities. The diplomatic protocols he had memorized seemed utterly inadequate for their current situation. Weapons status? 2 particle beam arrays online, Captain. Point defense systems are active. But sir, those ships are heavily armed. We're outgunned at least 10 to 1. The Kytherian assault cruisers moved with predatory grace, their hulls gleaming with an oily iridescence that seemed to shift and flow in the starlight. Each ship bristled with weapon emplacements, their designs alien and menacing. They moved to surround the human vessel, cutting off escape routes with practiced efficiency. Zexhai watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The human ship was trapped, exactly as planned. Their weapons were laughably primitive, their shields barely registering on Kytherian sensors. This would be over quickly. "Signal the human vessel," he ordered. Standard surrender demands. The transmission that reached the Endeavor was a mixture of electronic screeches and harmonics that their computers struggled to translate. When the universal translator finally processed the message, its content was clear enough. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed." "Sir," Rodriguez reported, "they're demanding we stand down and prepare to be boarded." The translation matrix identifies the language as previously unknown. Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had volunteered for a peaceful research mission, not a combat engagement with hostile aliens. He had a responsibility to keep them alive, but he also knew what being captured by an unknown species might mean for humanity. "Send a response," Morrison said finally. "Tell them we are on a peaceful scientific mission. We mean them no harm, and request safe passage." The reply came back within seconds. Compliance was not optional. Sarah had made her way to the bridge during the exchange, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. She studied the alien vessels on the main view screen, noting their unusual design aesthetics and movement patterns. "Captain," she said quietly, "their formation and behavior suggest these are military vessels, not explorers or traders. They've surrounded us with precision that indicates extensive training. This wasn't a chance encounter." Morrison nodded grimly. "Which means they came here specifically for us. The question is why?" The answer came in the form of 3 boarding pods launched from the Kytherian vessels. Each pod was designed to burn through a ship's hull and disgorge a squad of heavily armed soldiers. The Kytherians had used similar tactics countless times against other species, and they expected the same rapid capitulation they had always achieved. They had never fought humans before. The first pod struck the Endeavor's port hull with a grinding shriek of metal. Immediately, the ship's damage control systems activated, sealing off the affected section and flooding it with fire suppression foam. But the Kytherian cutting tools were designed for this exact scenario, and within minutes they had carved a perfect circular entry point. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the damage control officer. "Atmospheric pressure dropping in sections 12 through 15. Morrison grabbed the ship-wide intercom. "All crew, this is the captain. We are being boarded by hostile forces. Defensive positions Alpha through Gamma are now in effect. Protect the civilians and remember your training." The Endeavor might have been a research vessel, but all Terran deep space missions required basic military preparation. Each crew member had spent months in combat simulation, learning to use the ship's limited armaments and defensive positions. They had hoped never to need those skills. The first Kytherian soldiers to enter the ship were confident in their superiority. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with powerful exoskeletons and advanced energy weapons, they had overwhelmed every species they had previously encountered. Their intelligence reports on humans suggested a relatively weak species, dependent on technology rather than natural physical abilities. The intelligence reports were catastrophically wrong. Security Chief Martinez had positioned himself at the primary defensive choke point leading from the breach. A former colonial marine, he understood corridor fighting better than most. As the first group of Kytherians rounded the corner, he opened fire with a military-grade pulse rifle. The aliens had expected to face cowering scientists with improvised weapons. Instead, they found themselves under accurate, disciplined fire from someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The first 3 Kytherians fell before they could even raise their weapons, their exoskeletons cracking under the impact of high-energy projectiles. The surviving aliens dove for cover, their confidence shaken. According to their briefings, humans were supposed to be fragile, easily intimidated creatures. The being firing at them moved with the fluid precision of a trained killer, and his weapons were far more effective than their intelligence had suggested. HFY to Assault Team 1. The commander's voice crackled over their communication devices. Report your status. We've encountered unexpected resistance, Commander, the team leader replied, ducking as another burst of gunfire chewed through the bulkhead above his head. The humans are better armed and trained than anticipated, requesting additional support. Similar reports were coming in from the other boarding parties. What should have been a simple capture operation was turning into a grinding firefight, with the humans giving far better than they got. In the biolab, Sarah had armed herself with one of the emergency plasma cutters, its industrial-strength beam capable of slicing through reinforced steel. She wasn't a soldier, but she had grown up on a frontier colony where everyone learned to defend themselves. As she heard the sounds of fighting echoing through the ship's corridors, she made a decision that would echo through the galaxy. She wasn't going to be taken alive, and she was going to make the aliens regret ever finding them. The battle raged through the corridors of the Endeavor with an intensity that shocked the Kytherian assault teams. Every meter they advanced came at a heavy cost, as the human crew fought with a ferocity that defied their intelligence reports. These weren't cowering civilians. They were defending their home, their friends, their very existence. Engineer Thompson had rigged the ship's maintenance shafts with improvised explosive devices, using components from the mining equipment stored in Cargo Bay 3. When the second boarding party attempted to flank through the service tunnels, they walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. The explosions didn't just kill the aliens. They sealed off entire sections of the ship, forcing the remaining Kytherians into narrow kill zones where the human superior knowledge of the ship's layout became decisive. Medical Officer Dr. Patel had transformed the ship's sick bay into a fortress, using surgical tables as barricades and medical equipment as improvised weapons. When 3 Kytherian soldiers burst through the doors expecting to find helpless wounded, they instead encountered a physician wielding a bone saw who had taken an oath to first do no harm, an oath that apparently didn't extend to murderous aliens. The Kytherians' advanced energy weapons, designed to be effective against their traditional enemies, proved less devastating against human physiology than expected. Where other species would have been instantly incapacitated by neural disruptors, humans seemed to shrug off the effects and keep fighting. Their redundant organ systems and decentralized nervous structure made them remarkably difficult to disable without killing outright. Commander HFY watched his casualty reports with growing disbelief. In 30 minutes of fighting, he had lost more soldiers than in his last 5 campaigns combined. The humans were supposed to be easy prey, a simple collection mission that would advance his career and provide the Empire with valuable research subjects. Instead, his elite assault teams were being systematically destroyed by what should have been inferior opponents. Commander, his tactical officer reported, Assault Team 3 has gone silent. Last transmission indicated they were pinned down near the ship's reactor core. Team 2 is requesting immediate evacuation. They've taken 70% casualties. HFY's mandibles clicked furiously. What about the primary target? Have they located the female scientist? Negative, sir. She was last detected in the laboratory section, but our teams haven't been able to advance that far. The humans have created interlocking fields of fire that make progress extremely difficult. Sarah Chun crouched behind an overturned lab table, the plasma cutter humming in her hands. She had already used it to devastating effect against 2 Kytherian soldiers who had tried to breach the lab's rear entrance. The high-energy beam designed for cutting through asteroid samples proved equally effective at slicing through alien armor. The ship shuddered around her as another explosion echoed through the corridors. She could hear the sounds of fighting getting closer, punctuated by the distinctive whine of alien energy weapons and the sharp crack of human projectile guns. Through the lab's communication panel, she could monitor the ship's status and coordinate with the other survivors. Martinez to all positions. The security chief's voice crackled over the intercom. They're regrouping for a major push toward the bridge. All available personnel fall back to defensive position Gamma. We need to protect the captain and the navigation systems. Sarah looked around her lab, at the years of research data and samples that represented humanity's growing understanding of the galaxy. If the aliens captured this information, they would learn about human exploration patterns, population centers, defensive capabilities. She couldn't allow that to happen. Her fingers flew over the lab's computer interface, initiating a complete data purge. Every file, every research note, every sample analysis was being systematically deleted and overwritten. If she was going to die on this ship, she would make sure the aliens gained nothing from her sacrifice. The sound of cutting tools echoed from the lab's main entrance. The Kytherians were attempting to breach the reinforced blast doors, their equipment sending showers of sparks cascading across the floor. Sarah estimated she had perhaps 5 minutes before they broke through. She used the time to set one final trap. The lab's emergency systems included a massive decontamination protocol designed to sterilize the entire section in case of biological contamination. Sarah had studied the technical specifications during her orientation, never imagining she would use them as a weapon. The system would flood the lab with high-intensity radiation, superheated plasma, and corrosive chemical compounds, lethal to any organic life form, including herself. Sarah activated the 30-second countdown and picked up her plasma cutter. If the aliens wanted her alive, they were about to be very disappointed. The blast doors finally gave way just as the decontamination warning began blaring throughout the section. For Kytherian soldiers rushed into the lab, their energy weapons trained on every possible hiding spot. They expected to find the human scientist cowering behind her equipment, ready to surrender in exchange for her life. Instead, they found Dr. Sarah Chun standing calmly in the center of the room, holding a device they didn't recognize, her face set with grim determination. 20 seconds to decontamination protocol activation, the ship's computer announced. The lead Kytherian soldier raised his weapon, preparing to use a neural disruptor to incapacitate the human without permanent damage. His orders were clear. The female had to be taken alive for study. Sarah smiled coldly and raised her plasma cutter. "Come and get me." What followed was a brief but vicious firefight in the confined space of a laboratory. Sarah's knowledge of the lab's layout gave her temporary advantages as she used equipment and furniture for cover, but she was vastly outnumbered. The Kytherians' energy weapons scored hits on her arms and legs, sending waves of numbing pain through her nervous system. But humans, as the aliens were learning, had an uncomfortable tendency to keep fighting long past the point where other species would have collapsed. Even as neural disruptor energy coursed through her body, Sarah continued to fight with desperate fury, her plasma cutter slicing through alien armor and flesh with equal efficiency. 10 seconds to decontamination protocol. 2 of the Kytherian soldiers were down, their exoskeletons cracked and oozing strange fluids. The remaining 2 realized the danger they were in as emergency seals began engaging around the laboratory. They had to extract their prize immediately or risk losing her to whatever the human ship was about to do to this section. Sarah felt her strength failing as the neural disruptor effects accumulated in her system. Her vision was beginning to blur, and her coordination was deteriorating rapidly. But she only needed to last 5 more seconds. 3:10. Decontamination protocol activated. The laboratory transformed into a hellscape of radiation and superheated plasma. Emergency vents opened in the walls and ceiling, flooding the space with lethal energies designed to sterilize even the most resilient biological contaminants. The remaining Kytherian soldiers' screams were cut short as their exoskeletons failed under the assault. Sarah Chun died as the radiation tore through her cellular structure, but her final expression was one of triumph. She had denied the aliens their prize, protected her research, and bought her crewmates precious time. The decontamination field raged for a full minute before shutting down, leaving the laboratory a sterile tomb. When Commander Zexai's technical teams finally managed to breach the emergency seals hours later. They found nothing but scorched metal and the molecular remnants of what had once been living creatures. Aboard his flagship, HFY stared at the tactical reports with growing rage. His assault teams were being systematically eliminated by humans who fought like demons. Worse, his primary objective, capturing the female scientist alive, had ended in complete failure. The human had chosen to die rather than be taken, destroying herself and valuable research data in the process. Status of the remaining human vessel, he demanded. Still under attack, Commander, but resistance remains fierce. Our forces control approximately 30% of the ship, but the humans have established strong defensive positions around critical systems. Casualty reports continue to mount. HFY's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. The operation was becoming a disaster, but retreating now would mean explaining to High Command how an elite Kytherian assault force had been repelled by a handful of human scientists. His career, possibly his life, depended on salvaging something from this debacle. Prepare the orbital bombardment systems, he ordered. If we cannot take them alive, we will at least ensure they cannot escape to warn their species. Sir, his tactical officer said hesitantly, the High Command specifically requested live specimens. The High Command will have to settle for wreckage and whatever genetic material we can recover from the debris, HFY snapped. These humans have proven far more dangerous than anticipated. I will not risk additional ships to capture creatures who prefer death to surrender. On the Endeavor, Captain Morrison received the devastating news about Dr. Chun through the ship's internal sensors. The loss of the brilliant scientist was a blow that went beyond mere numbers. She had been the heart of their mission, the driving force behind their exploration of unknown space. But her sacrifice had given them something precious, proof that humans could fight these aliens and win. Every Kytherian soldier killed was one less threat to humanity. Every small victory a lesson that could save lives in future encounters. Captain, Communications Officer Rodriguez reported, I'm picking up massive energy buildup from the alien flagship. It looks like they're charging their main weapons. Morrison understood immediately. Unable to capture them, the aliens intended to destroy the ship entirely. He looked around the bridge at his surviving crew members, seeing the same grim determination in their faces that had carried them this far. All hands, this is the captain, he announced over the ship-wide intercom. The enemy is preparing to destroy our ship rather than let us escape. We fought them to a standstill, but our ammunition is running low and our defensive positions are compromised. However, our deaths here today will not be in vain. Morrison paused, choosing his words carefully. These might be the last words that humanity ever heard from the crew of the Endeavor. We've proven that humans can fight these creatures and win. Every one of us who dies here takes multiple enemies with us. When our people learn what happened here, they'll know that humanity doesn't surrender, doesn't break, and doesn't go quietly into the night. We fight, we bleed, and we make them regret ever discovering us. The ship trembled as the Kytherian flagship's main weapons reached full charge. Soon, concentrated plasma beams would reduce the Endeavor to scattered atoms, ending the lives of everyone aboard. But in those final moments, as alarms blared and damage reports flooded the bridge, Captain Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The aliens had come hunting for easy prey and instead found something that would haunt their species for generations to come. They had found humans. The Kytherian flagship's main weapons discharged with devastating force, sending concentrated plasma beams lancing across space toward the crippled research vessel. For a moment, the Endeavor was silhouetted against the brilliant energy discharge, its hull glowing white-hot as the alien weapons found their target. Then, the ship was gone, vaporized in a flash of superheated gas and debris that scattered across the asteroid field. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the Kytherian ship's engines as they maintained position around the destruction site. Commander HFY studied the expanding cloud of wreckage with mixed feelings. The immediate threat had been eliminated, but the mission had been a complete failure. Instead of capturing valuable human specimens, he had lost nearly 60% of his assault force and gained nothing but a handful of tissue samples and weapon fragments. Begin debris collection, he ordered. Recover everything larger than 5 centimeters. The science teams will want to analyze their technology and biological remains. What Zexai didn't realize was that the destruction of the Endeavor had triggered an automated distress beacon, a device designed to activate only in the event of total ship loss. The beacon transmitted on quantum frequencies that would reach the nearest human outpost within hours, carrying detailed sensor logs of the attack and battle. The message would reach Frontier Station Delta 7 first, a military outpost on the edge of human space commanded by Colonel Marcus Kane. A veteran of 3 colonial wars, Kane had spent decades preparing for the day when humanity would face a threat from beyond their borders. When the Endeavor's final transmission reached his communications array, he knew that day had finally arrived. Analysis confirms the attacking vessels were of unknown configuration, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the station's intelligence officer. Energy signatures and weapon patterns don't match any known species in our databases. This appears to be first contact with a hostile alien civilization. Kane studied the tactical data transmitted by the Endeavor sensors during the battle. The human crew had fought magnificently against overwhelming odds, but the technological disparity was clear. The alien vessels were larger, faster, and far more heavily armed than anything in the human fleet. But the sensor logs also revealed something else. The aliens had taken significant casualties during the boarding action. Their soldiers were not invincible, and their weapons, while advanced, were not incomparably superior to human technology. Dispatch priority alerts to all fleet commands, Kane ordered. Full military mobilization, condition red. And give me a direct line to Earth Command. The politicians need to know we're at war. The response from Earth was swift and decisive. Humanity might have been caught off guard by the initial attack, but they had been preparing for interstellar conflict since the first colony ships left the solar system. Within 12 hours, every human military vessel within 50 light-years was converging on the last known position of the alien fleet. Admiral Rebecca Torres commanded the response force from her flagship, the battlecruiser Indomitable. A career naval officer who had served in the outer colonies since before the development of faster-than-light communication, she understood the stakes better than most. This wasn't just about avenging the Endeavor. It was about establishing humanity's right to exist among the stars. Fleet status report, Torres requested as the human ships dropped out of hyperspace near the attack site. 37 vessels present, Admiral, reported her tactical officer. 12 battlecruisers, 8 heavy cruisers, 15 destroyers, and 2 assault carriers. All ships report ready for combat operations. Torres nodded with satisfaction. It wasn't the largest force humanity had ever assembled, but it was the most advanced. Every ship had been equipped with the latest weapons and defensive systems, designed based on painful lessons learned during the colonial wars. The alien ships were still in the area, their crews working to collect debris from the destroyed research vessel. Commander Zexai had expected to have time to thoroughly analyze the wreckage and plan his next move. The sudden appearance of a massive human fleet caught the Kytherians completely off guard. "Contact!" shouted the sensor operator aboard the Kytherian flagship. Multiple vessels emerging from hyperspace. Configuration matches the destroyed ship, but much larger. Count is 37 vessels and climbing. Zexai felt his confidence evaporate as the tactical display filled with hostile contacts. His 3 assault cruisers were formidable against civilian targets, but they were hopelessly outnumbered by what appeared to be a full human battle fleet. "Communications to all ships," he ordered. "Prepare for immediate withdrawal. Signal the Empire that we have encountered a major human military force." But Admiral Torres had no intention of letting the aliens escape to threaten other human vessels. Her fleet had arrived with specific orders: eliminate the hostile force completely and send a message that humanity would not be preyed upon by alien predators. "All ships, weapons free," Torres transmitted. "Target the 3 alien vessels and open fire. No survivors." The human fleet opened fire with devastating precision. Their weapons systems coordinated through quantum-linked fire control networks that allowed perfect synchronization across dozens of ships. The space around the Kytherian vessels erupted in a storm of energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and guided missiles. The alien shields, designed to deflect the relatively primitive weapons they had encountered from other species, proved inadequate against the concentrated firepower of human military technology. The first Kytherian cruiser's defenses failed within seconds, its hull cracking open like an egg as antimatter warheads found their target. Zexhai watched in horror as his escort ships were systematically destroyed by the human fleet. The sheer volume of incoming fire was beyond anything the Kytherians had faced before. These humans didn't just fight, they fought with a cold, calculated efficiency that spoke of generations of military evolution. "Emergency hyperspace jump," he shouted to his navigation officer. "Maximum speed, any direction." But the human fleet had anticipated escape attempts. Admiral Torres had positioned her fastest ships to block all hyperspace exit vectors, creating a tactical box that trapped the remaining alien vessels within normal space. The second Kytherian cruiser attempted to break through the human formation, its desperate crew pushing their engines beyond safe parameters. They almost made it to the edge of the trap before the battlecruiser Retribution intercepted them. The human warships' main guns spoke once, sending a concentrated beam of coherent energy through the alien vessel's reactor core. The resulting explosion lit up the asteroid field like a miniature star. Zexhai found himself alone, his flagship surrounded by 37 human warships with their weapons trained on his position. His communications officer was frantically trying to establish contact with the human fleet, broadcasting surrender offers in every language the Kytherian databases contained. Admiral Torres received the surrender transmission with grim satisfaction. The alien commander was offering to negotiate, to discuss terms, to establish diplomatic relations between their species. Under normal circumstances, she might have been interested in such discussions. But the Endeavor had carried 43 souls, including some of humanity's brightest scientific minds. Their last transmission had painted a clear picture of alien brutality, of soldiers who had come not to communicate but to capture and study humans like laboratory animals. "Signal the alien vessel," Torres ordered. "Message is simple, the same terms you offer the Endeavor." The communication that reached Zexhai was brief and delivered in perfectly translated Kytherian. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed." The irony was not lost on the alien commander. He had offered the same ultimatum to the human research vessel, expecting immediate compliance. Now he faced the same choice he had forced upon his victims. But, unlike the humans of the Endeavor, Zexhai was not prepared to die for his principles. His species valued survival above honor, cooperation above resistance. When faced with overwhelming force, the logical response was surrender and negotiation. "Signal our compliance," he ordered his communications officer. "Prepare for boarding and inspection." Torres watched as the alien vessel powered down its weapons and shields, adopting the submissive posture that indicated surrender. Part of her wanted to finish the job, to avenge the Endeavor with the complete destruction of the enemy fleet. But she was also a professional military officer who understood the value of intelligence. "Boarding parties, prepare for hostile environment entry," she commanded. "Full combat gear, assume hostile intent. I want that ship's computer systems intact, and any surviving crew alive for interrogation." The human Marines who boarded the Kytherian flagship were veterans of colonial pacification campaigns, trained in close-quarters combat and alien environment operations. Unlike the research vessel crew who had fought with improvised weapons and desperate courage, these were professional soldiers with military-grade equipment and decades of combat experience. Commander Zexhai and his surviving crew found themselves facing humans who moved with mechanical precision, their powered armor making them appear larger and more threatening than the civilian researchers who had fought so fiercely aboard the Endeavor. These humans showed no fear, no hesitation, only cold professional competence that was somehow more terrifying than raw aggression. The Kytherians who had survived the boarding action on a research vessel had reported that humans were dangerous fighters, but they had attributed that to desperation and primitive savagery. Now, they realized their mistake. Humans weren't just dangerous when cornered. They were dangerous all the time. As the human Marines secured the alien vessel and began extracting data from its computer systems, Admiral Torres received reports that would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. The Kytherian databases contain star charts showing the location of their home systems, military deployment patterns for their fleet, and, most importantly, detailed files on dozens of other species. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy, but they were apparently unique in one crucial respect. They were the only species that fought back. The files revealed a pattern of Kytherian expansion that had continued unchallenged for centuries. Species after species had surrendered when faced with superior technology, accepting subjugation rather than extinction. Those few that had resisted had been systematically exterminated, their worlds sterilized, and claimed by the expanding empire. But none of them had fought like humans. None of them had chosen death over capture, or inflicted casualties on their attackers through sheer bloody-minded determination. The Kytherians had expected humanity to follow the same pattern as all their previous conquests. They had been catastrophically wrong. Admiral Torres studied the intelligence reports with growing understanding. The attack on the Endeavor hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been a test, a probe to determine human capabilities and responses. The aliens had expected to capture specimens for study, then return with a larger force to demand humanity's submission. Instead, they had learned that humans were something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that would not surrender, would not submit, and would not go quietly into the night. Every human death would cost the aliens dearly, and every human survivor would carry the knowledge of how to hurt them. The war that was coming would not be the quick, clean conquest the Kytherians had planned. It would be a grinding, bloody conflict that would test both species to their limits. And as Admiral Torres looked at the captured alien vessel and its cowering crew, she allowed herself a cold smile. The aliens had started this war by trying to capture humans for study. They were about to learn what happened when humans decided to study them back. 6 months after the destruction of the Endeavor, the galaxy had become a very different place. The captured Kytherian databases had provided humanity with a complete picture of the alien empire structure, military capabilities, and, most importantly, the locations of their subject species. What human analysts discovered changed everything. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the leading xenosociologist at Earth Strategic Research Institute, stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Council with findings that would reshape humanity's approach to interstellar relations. The holographic display behind her showed a three-dimensional map of local galactic space, dotted with the territories of dozens of previously unknown civilizations. The Kytherian Empire controls or influences 47 star systems, she reported to the assembled delegates. Their expansion pattern shows a consistent methodology. They identify developing species, assess their military capabilities, then demand submission through overwhelming force. Those who comply become tribute states. Those who resist face complete annihilation. Council Chairman Martinez leaned forward in his seat. And their assessment of humanity? According to the captured files, we were classified as a Class 7 species, Harper continued. Moderate technological development, presumed peaceful disposition, estimated resistance factor less than 10%. They expected us to surrender after a single demonstration of their superior capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the chamber. The aliens had been so certain of human compliance that they had sent only a small force to capture specimens for study. The complete destruction of that force had sent shockwaves through the Kytherian Empire that were still reverberating. Intelligence suggests the Empire is facing an unprecedented crisis, reported Admiral Torres, now serving as Chief of Military Operations. Our resistance has inspired rebellion among their subject species. At least 12 systems have declared independence, and Kytherian military forces are stretched thin trying to maintain control. The human military response had been swift and brutal. Using the captured star charts, Earth's fleets had launched coordinated strikes against Kytherian military installations across 3 sectors. Each attack followed the same pattern. Overwhelming force applied with surgical precision, complete destruction of enemy assets, and immediate withdrawal before reinforcements could arrive. But the real damage wasn't being done by human weapons. It was being done by human ideas. The concept of successful resistance against the Kytherians had spread through the galactic community like wildfire. Species that had lived under alien domination for generations suddenly began asking questions that had been forbidden for centuries. Why should they accept submission? What would happen if they fought back? If humans could defeat Kytherian forces, why couldn't they? Commander HFY, the sole surviving senior officer from the original attack on the Endeavor, found himself facing a tribunal of the Empire's highest leaders. His failure had not only cost the military valuable resources, it had triggered the worst crisis in Kytherian history. Explain to this tribunal, demanded High Inquisitor Vethran, how 3 assault cruisers with elite boarding teams were defeated by a single human research vessel. HFY's mandibles clicked nervously as he recalled the events that had destroyed his career and threatened the Empire itself. The humans fought with unprecedented savagery, High Inquisitor. They showed no regard for their own survival, choosing death over capture. Their weapons were more effective than our intelligence suggested, and their tactics were far more sophisticated than expected from a civilian crew. You're telling this tribunal, Vethran continued, that 43 human civilians defeated 300 Kytherian soldiers. The humans used their knowledge of the ship's systems against us, HFY replied defensively. They turned civilian equipment into weapons, created traps using industrial machinery, and fought with a coordination that suggested military training. The female scientist actually activated a decontamination system, choosing to die rather than allow herself to be captured. The tribunal members exchanged glances. The concept of voluntary death rather than surrender was almost incomprehensible to the Kytherian mindset. Their culture valued survival and adaptation above all other considerations. The idea that a sentient being would choose destruction over the possibility of eventual escape or rescue suggested a fundamental difference in psychology that their strategists had completely failed to anticipate. And the subsequent engagement with their military fleet? Vethran pressed. 37 warships arrived within hours, HFY reported. Their coordination was flawless, their weapons were more advanced than our projections indicated, and they showed no interest in negotiation or surrender terms. They destroyed my escort vessels and captured my flagship with professional efficiency that demonstrated extensive military planning. What HFY didn't tell the tribunal was how the human Marines had treated their Kytherian prisoners. Unlike the Empire's standard interrogation techniques, which relied on pain and intimidation, the humans had used psychological pressure and careful analysis of their captives' behavioral patterns. They had learned more about Kytherian society in 6 months than the Empire had learned about humans in years of study. The captured aliens found themselves in research facilities where they were studied, tested, and analyzed with the same clinical detachment they had planned to apply to human subjects. The irony was not lost on them, but the humans' methods were far more sophisticated than anything the Kytherians had developed. Dr. Marcus Webb, head of the Xenobiology Research Division, had spent months analyzing the physical and psychological characteristics of their alien prisoners. His findings have been distributed to every human military unit, providing detailed information on Kytherian weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Their exoskeletons provide excellent protection against energy weapons, Webb explained to a gathering of military officers, but they're vulnerable to kinetic impacts at specific stress points. Their neural structure is centralized rather than distributed, making them susceptible to certain types of sensory overload. Most importantly, their psychological conditioning emphasizes survival over resistance, making them prone to surrender when faced with determined opposition. The information had proven invaluable in subsequent engagements. Human forces had won decisive victories against Kytherian fleets not through superior technology, but through superior understanding of their enemies. Every captured alien provided new data, every battle revealed additional weaknesses, and every human victory inspired further rebellion among the Empire's subject species. The Altarian Confederation was among the first to openly declare independence from Kytherian rule. A aquatic species that had been conquered 3 centuries earlier, the Altarians had maintained their industrial base under alien supervision, producing manufactured goods for the Empire in exchange for protection from other threats. When news of human victories reached their system, the Altarian Council made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months before. They expelled all Kytherian overseers and declared their intention to resist any attempt at reoccupation. The Empire's response was predictable and swift. A punitive fleet of 12 heavy cruisers arrived in the Altarian system with orders to bombard the primary world until the rebellion was crushed. What they found waiting for them was a human battle group that had been secretly deployed to support the independence movement. The Battle of Altair Prime became the first major fleet engagement between human and Kytherian forces. Admiral Chun, commanding from the battleship Defiance, faced odds of nearly 2-1 against an enemy that had never experienced a major defeat in space combat. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Kytherian fleet. Human tactical doctrines, developed through decades of colonial conflicts, proved devastatingly effective against an enemy that had grown complacent after centuries of easy victories. The aliens' rigid command structure and predictable tactics made them vulnerable to the flexible, aggressive approach that characterized human military thinking. More importantly, the battle was broadcast throughout the galaxy by Altarian communication networks. Dozens of species watched as human ships outmaneuvered and destroyed forces that had dominated the galaxy for generations. The myth of Kytherian invincibility died in the fires of burning alien warships. Within weeks, independence movements erupted across the Empire. The Vialian mining collective ceased all shipments to Kytherian worlds. The Thraxian Federation began producing weapons instead of agricultural products. Even the traditionally passive Etherians started coordinating resistance activities with human intelligence operatives. The Empire found itself fighting a multi-front war against enemies it had never expected to face. Resources that should have been used to crush humanity were instead diverted to maintaining control over increasingly rebellious subject species. The careful balance of power that had maintained Kytherian dominance for centuries was collapsing. High Inquisitor Vethran stood before the Empire's Supreme Council with reports that would have been unimaginable just months before. Military command estimates that we have lost effective control of 31% of our territory, she announced to the assembled leaders. Rebellion is spreading faster than we can contain it, and human forces are coordinating resistance efforts across multiple sectors. What do our analysts recommend? Asked Supreme Chancellor Kethvar, the ultimate authority in the Kytherian Empire. They suggest 3 possible courses of action, Vethran replied. First, we could concentrate our forces and attempt to crush the human homeworlds, hoping that eliminating their leadership will end the rebellion. Second, we could negotiate a truce and recognize human territorial claims in exchange for an end to their interference in our internal affairs. Third, we could withdraw to our core systems and abandon the outer territories until we could develop more effective countermeasures. The Chancellor considered the options with growing unease. Each choice represented a fundamental admission of failure, an acknowledgement that the Empire's expansion had been stopped by a species they had barely noticed just months before. There is a fourth option, Vethran continued reluctantly. Some military leaders suggest complete extermination of the human species through planetary bombardment. They argue that humans are too dangerous to be allowed to exist in any form. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Genocide was not unknown in Kytherian history, but it had always been applied to species that posed military threats to the Empire's expansion. The idea that a single research vessel's destruction could lead to considering the extermination of an entire civilization was unprecedented. And what do the analysts believe would result from such action? The Chancellor asked. Immediate rebellion across the entire Empire, Vethran admitted. Our subject species have seen what humans accomplished with minimal resources. If we exterminate humanity through orbital bombardment, every species in the galaxy will assume they could be next. The Empire would face universal rebellion within days. Chancellor Kethvar looked around the chamber at his advisors, seeing the same grim understanding in their faces. The attempt to capture a human scientist for study had triggered a chain of events that threatened to destroy everything the Kytherians had built over centuries of careful expansion. And at the center of it all was the memory of Dr. Sarah Chun, the human female who had chosen death over capture, destroying herself and her research rather than surrender to alien captors. Her sacrifice had become a symbol of human resistance that inspired rebellion across the galaxy. The Kytherians had ordered her taken alive, believing she would provide valuable intelligence about human capabilities and weaknesses. Instead, her death had revealed a truth that would reshape galactic civilization. There were some species that would not surrender, would not submit, and would not go quietly into the night. The Empire had awakened something it could not control, and the galaxy would never be the same. 2 years had passed since the destruction of the Endeavor, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to the orderly empire that the Kytherians had once controlled. The Memorial Hall on Earth's newest colony, New Geneva, displayed a holographic image of Dr. Sarah Chun alongside the 42 other crew members who had died aboard the research vessel. Their names were carved in black stone beneath a simple inscription. They chose to fight. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood before the memorial, preparing for what would be the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. Representatives from 37 species had gathered on New Geneva to establish the Galactic Liberation Alliance, a confederation dedicated to maintaining the independence that human sacrifice had made possible. The irony was not lost on anyone present. A species the Kytherians had dismissed as primitive and peaceful had become the foundation of the largest multi-species alliance in recorded galactic history. The intelligence reports are confirmed, reported General Martinez, now serving as director of Alliance military operations. Kytherian forces have withdrawn to their core systems, abandoning nearly 60% of their former territory. Their military capabilities have been reduced by estimated 70% due to constant rebellions and resource shortages. Rodriguez nodded as she reviewed the strategic assessments. The empire that had once seemed invincible was collapsing under the weight of universal resistance. But she knew better than to assume the war was over. Desperate enemies often made the most dangerous choices. In the Kytherian capital system of Vextar Prime, Supreme Chancellor Kethvar faced the most difficult decision in his species' history. Military advisors presented him with detailed plans for what they called the final solution, the complete sterilization of every world that had declared independence from the Empire. The orbital bombardment platforms are in position, reported Fleet Admiral Kexthal. We can eliminate the human homeworld, the Altarian colonies, and 12 other major rebel systems within a single coordinated strike. Without their leadership, the rebellion will collapse within months. And the cost? Kethvar asked, though he already knew the answer. Every ship in the Imperial Navy, every resource in our treasury, every soldier in our military, the Admiral replied. We would become a single-system civilization, but we would have eliminated the threat to our species' survival. The Chancellor studied the tactical displays showing human and Allied fleets positioned throughout former Imperial space. 2 years of constant warfare had taught the Kytherians exactly how dangerous these new enemies could be. Human tactical doctrine emphasized rapid movement, concentrated force, and systematic destruction of enemy assets. They fought like a species that had been born for war, turning every engagement into a demonstration of superior strategy and determination. But it was their influence on other species that truly threatened the Empire. The humans had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had convinced entire civilizations that freedom was worth dying for. The concept of resistance had spread like a virus through the galaxy, infecting species that had accepted Kytherian rule for centuries. There is still the possibility of negotiated settlement, suggested diplomatic minister Zalvex. The humans have indicated willingness to discuss territorial boundaries and trade agreements. We could maintain sovereignty over our core systems while recognizing the independence of rebel territories. Admiral Kexthal's mandibles clicked with disgust. Negotiation with inferior species is what led to this crisis. We should have exterminated the humans immediately after their first act of resistance. The debate had raged for weeks in the Empire's highest councils. Military leaders demanded total war, while civilian administrators argued for diplomatic solutions. But everyone understood the fundamental reality. The Kytherian Empire, as it had existed for centuries, was already dead. The only question was whether its death would be gradual or catastrophic. On the human flagship Indomitable, Admiral Torres received intelligence reports that confirmed her worst fears. Long-range sensors had detected massive energy buildups around Kytherian military installations, patterns consistent with preparations for strategic bombardment operations. They're planning to glass every rebel world, she reported to the Alliance Council through quantum communication. Our analysis suggests they have enough firepower to sterilize at least 20 star systems before we could mount an effective response. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Alliance leadership. The war had been fought with conventional weapons and tactics, but the Kytherians were apparently prepared to escalate to planetary destruction rather than accept defeat. Estimated casualties? Asked Ambassador Rodriguez. Approximately 40 billion sentient beings across all targeted systems, Torres replied, including 8 billion humans on our colony worlds. The numbers were staggering, but they also revealed the desperation driving Kytherian strategic planning. No rational military leadership would sacrifice their entire fleet for a single coordinated strike unless they believed their species' survival was at stake. Dr. Marcus Webb, who had spent 2 years studying Kytherian psychology, provided the analysis that would guide humanity's final strategic decision. Their cultural conditioning emphasizes species survival above all other considerations, he explained to the emergency strategy session. They view this conflict not as a territorial dispute, but as an existential threat to their civilization. From their perspective, destroying the rebellion is worth any cost, which means negotiation is impossible, concluded General Martinez. They won't stop until either they're destroyed or we are. Rodriguez studied the strategic displays showing Alliance and Kytherian force dispositions throughout the galaxy. The humans and their allies had numerical superiority, but the enemy's willingness to sacrifice everything for a devastating first strike gave them a dangerous advantage. There is one other factor to consider, Webb continued. Kytherian command structure is extremely hierarchical. Their entire military operates through centralized control systems based on their homeworld. If we could eliminate their command authority, the Empire would collapse completely, Torres finished. Without central coordination, their forces would fragment into local warlords competing for resources. The plan that emerged from that strategy session was audacious even by human standards. Rather than wait for the Kytherians to launch their genocidal bombardment, the Alliance would strike directly at the heart of the Empire. Every available ship would be committed to a single, overwhelming assault on Vextar Prime, the Kytherian capital system. It would be the largest military operation in galactic history, and its success or failure would determine the fate of every free species in the galaxy. 3 weeks later, the Alliance fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Vextar system. Nearly 2,000 ships from 37 species had answered humanity's call, creating an armada that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. At its center, the human battleship Endeavor's Revenge carried the memorial flag from the destroyed research vessel. Supreme Chancellor Kethvar watched the massive fleet deployment on his tactical displays with something approaching admiration. The humans had managed to coordinate the largest military operation in galactic history, bringing together species that had been enemies for millennia in service of a single objective. All defensive platforms are online, reported Fleet Admiral Kexthal. Orbital fortresses are at full readiness. The homeworld shields are at maximum power. The Kytherian capital system was the most heavily defended location in the galaxy, protected by centuries of military construction and advanced defensive technologies. No enemy force had ever penetrated the system's outer perimeter, let alone threatened the primary world. But then, no enemy had ever brought 2,000 warships supported by humanity's relentless tactical innovation. The battle began with a coordinated barrage from the Alliance fleet that lit up space with the fury of artificial suns. Human weapons, Altarian torpedo systems, Thraxian particle beams, and dozens of other technologies combined in a symphony of destruction that overwhelmed the Kytherian defensive grids. Admiral Torres coordinated the assault from the bridge of the Indomitable, her tactical displays showing the systematic elimination of enemy strongpoints throughout the system. The humans had learned everything they knew about modern warfare from fighting each other in the colonial conflicts, and that knowledge was proving devastatingly effective against an enemy that had grown complacent after centuries of easy victories. Outer defensive grid is down, reported a tactical officer. All Alliance battle groups are advancing according to schedule. The fighting was fierce, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Kytherians fought with desperate courage, but their rigid tactical doctrines and centralized command structure made them vulnerable to the fluid, adaptive approach that characterized Alliance operations. Ship after ship fell to coordinated attacks that exploited weaknesses the humans had identified through careful study of captured Kytherian technology. On Vextara Prime, Supreme Chancellor Kethvar made his final decision. The Empire was doomed, its military was collapsing, and the homeworld would soon fall to the Alliance fleet. He could surrender and hope for mercy from species the Kytherians had oppressed for centuries, or he could ensure that his people's sacrifice would be remembered. Activate the Planetary Defense Protocol, he ordered. If we cannot hold the homeworld, we will deny it to the enemy. The protocol he referenced was a doomsday weapon built into the planet's core, designed to prevent the capital from ever falling into enemy hands. Its activation would destroy Vextara Prime and everyone on it, but it would also create an antimatter explosion large enough to eliminate most of the attacking fleet. Admiral Torres detected the energy buildup in the planet's core just minutes before the weapon reached critical mass. Her tactical analysis was instantaneous and terrifying. The Kytherians were preparing to destroy their own homeworld to take the Alliance fleet with them. All ships, emergency withdrawal, she broadcast across the fleet communication networks. Planetary doomsday device detected. Maximum burn away from the gravity well now. But even as she gave the order, Torres knew that many ships wouldn't be able to escape in time. The Alliance had achieved its objective of eliminating the Kytherian command structure, but the cost would be devastating. The explosion that consumed Vextara Prime was visible from neighboring star systems, a brilliant flash that marked the end of an empire that had dominated the galaxy for centuries. Nearly 300 Alliance ships were destroyed in the blast, their crews joining the thousands who had died to secure galactic freedom. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors among the wreckage, Ambassador Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her evacuation vessel looking at the expanding cloud of gas and debris that had once been the Kytherian homeworld. The war was over, the Empire was finished, but the victory felt hollow. Was it worth it? Asked Dr. Webb, joining her at the observation port. Rodriguez thought about Dr. Sarachun and the crew of the Endeavor, about the billions who had died in 2 years of warfare, about the species that had chosen freedom over security and resistance over submission. Ask the Altarians, she replied. Ask the Thraxians, the Etherians, all the species that will never again bow to alien masters. Ask the children who will grow up free, because 43 humans chose to fight rather than surrender. The memorial to the Endeavor crew would become the centerpiece of the new Alliance capital, a reminder that freedom always came at a price. But throughout the galaxy, on worlds that had never known independence, other monuments would rise to commemorate a simple truth that had changed the course of galactic civilization. Some species would not surrender, some would not submit, and some would choose death over the loss of their freedom, making that choice not just for themselves, but for every sentient being who would come after them. The Kytherians had ordered Dr. Sarachun taken alive, believing that capturing her would give them the key to conquering humanity. Instead, her death had given the galaxy something far more powerful, the knowledge that even the mightiest empire could fall if its subjects decided to fight back. None of the aliens who had come to capture her returned, but their failure had created something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization built on the principle that freedom was worth any sacrifice, and that some things were more important than mere survival. The galaxy would never be the same.